Fantasy football is starting to change. Players are getting injured. People are getting traded. And it's all starting to happen right before your drafts. I just drafted in the Flock League and it was crazy. And things have already started to unfold that will change the outcome of that league and your leagues. So here's the latest and greatest news for the players that you've got to keep your eye on and things that could be changing the values of certain players in fantasy football. Now, the first player I want to talk about is Devon Achane. And on August 13th, it came out that he had suffered a leg calf strain. So this is the first big injury of the season. Obviously, it's nothing that will keep him out for the entire season, but it is a player who is going in the first rounds, also going in the second round, depending on where you are drafting and how your league values him. But he has had 5 different injuries in the last 2 seasons, so this is a guy who I've seen pop up on the injury list. And is this one to be concerned about? A little bit, so I'm going to be walking through that. Now, he suffered quite a few injuries, the first one being an AC joint sprain back in 2023 of August, so right around the same time as now. And he suffered an MCL sprain in October 8th, 2023. And then September 8th, 2024, he had a ankle sprain, which was a high ankle sprain, which did take him out of the game in week 1 versus Jacksonville. And then, of course, he had his concussion on October 6th of last year. So he is a player who is known to get injuries. He gets banged up occasionally, but this last season, he did have a fully healthy season where he had 203 rushing attempts and 78 receptions, which is a huge usage for a guy his size. So he was the RB5 last year in your points per game leagues, and he's going as the running back 7 in ADP, which is right now going around the beginning of the second round. Sometimes he falls a little bit, but he can also go earlier, even hopping into that 112 range. Now, in my eyes, it is not sustainable for a guy his size. He's 5'9", 190 pounds. Now, I love Devon Achane, but to get all that volume at that size, it's just not sustainable, and that's kind of what we're seeing here, an injury after getting all that volume last year. Now, do I think that he's going to take a big value hit? No, I definitely do not think so. He still has insane upside, especially with how he can catch the ball like we saw last season, and now the Dolphins offense started running through him towards the end of the season there. I think that he could pick up right where he left off and be great for fantasy football again, but I also expect the Dolphins to go out and try to get somebody. If not, then they will just use one of their 2 backups to take up that goal line and short yardage work so that he doesn't have to have so many touches. Now, obviously, there are guys like Brian Robinson right now who are being shopped, so if he was the one who comes in on the Dolphins team, I'd be a little bit more worried than if it was like Ollie Gordon or Jalen Wright, because he could take up more than just those touches, and we know that he's a solid running back, especially if he had a split backfield with the Dolphins. So I would be a little bit more worried about Achane, but I'm only mildly worried at this point. I definitely would not panic on Achane. He's probably still going to be solid as long as he's healthy, and this isn't a serious threat at this point to missing games in season, but these calf injuries are ones that could linger, so that is the problem. If it doesn't heal quickly, it could be a problem down the line. But yet again, I've also seen his ADP kind of reflect with this injury. In best ball drafts, I've seen him dropping like 4 to 6 spots, and if that does happen in your redraft leagues, I am perfectly fine grabbing him there, especially in the middle of the second. And if he drops to the late second, that's insane value, but I really don't expect it to go that far. Now, moving on from Achane, we got the second player, which I already mentioned, which is Brian Robinson. Now, he did not play in the preseason game versus the Bengals. In fact, he wasn't even there. Now, the Commanders have made it clear that they are looking to shop Brian Robinson. This is not something that is just rumored anymore. It's something that is likely going to happen. It's just a matter of who is willing to spend up to get him, especially because this is his final year in his contract. Now, Brian Robinson last year started the season off hot. He averaged 15.5 fantasy points per game through the first 5 weeks, but then he did fizzle out there and was boom or bust throughout the rest of the season. We had games where he hit 17.9 points and was the running back 12 on the week with 103 yards and a touchdown. That was against Tennessee in week 13. But then we also have games like against Philadelphia in week 16, where if you started him, you just got burned. He had 0.1 points. That it was the running back 66, so he was not startable at all. He would have lost you that week in the championship if you had your championship there in week 16. So he's definitely very boomer bust, but with the right situation, he could be pretty solid if he does get his touchdowns like he did in the first 5 weeks. He had 1 touchdown, 0, 1, 1, and 2. So if he does get those touchdowns, his value could be sustainable for having like the 10 to 15 points per game. Now, B-Rob's relevance is completely dependent on where he goes, and his value fluctuates dramatically based on where he goes because of the opportunity that he has. And the top teams that he's linked to right now is number 1, the Dolphins, which would have a pretty low value. Achane would still be the most valuable running back in that backfield. But then you have the Cowboys, which he would have a tremendous opportunity to immediately become the running back one. All he's got to really do is beat out Javonte and maybe Jaden Blue, but we'll see what he's doing. And then we also have the Texans, which in my opinion would be a value jump. I'm not super high on Mixon this year. I actually think that Mixon will be injured for a lot of the season, and if the Texans do make this jump and actually trade for Brian Robinson, it's a good indicator that Mixon is likely going to miss more time than we had originally thought. And the absolute worst case scenario is Cincinnati. This is just terrible for all sides, so let's just hope he doesn't go to Cincinnati, because that has been rumored as well. I'm really high on Chase Brown. I've got a lot of him, and this would just ruin his value. Not completely, because we know Chase Brown's better than Brian Robinson, but for the sake of both of their values, let's just hope this one doesn't happen. And the last place he's rumored to is Chicago. And this could be good, could be bad. It would just be an absolute headache for trying to figure out who's going to be valuable in that backfield. And with the Ben Johnson offense, we know that there is some room to have value for a running back, but who's it going to be? Is it going to be a split? I don't know. So let's just hope he doesn't go there for the sake of trying to figure it out. Now, the good news about Brian Robinson is he is not going to be a fantasy starter for your teams, because you likely took a running back in the first few rounds unless you completely punted on it. So he's just a late round dart throw that has some value depending on where he goes, and he's fine if you need to have that upside. But right now, he's just a very polarizing player, and I would tend to just kind of avoid him if his cost is rising. Now, the big conversation is around the rest of the Commanders running backs, which is a legitimate conversation that we need to have. This is a team who wants to be legitimate Super Bowl contenders, and their offense is a big part of that. And this running back position is basically the cheapest way of getting a very valuable player in an offense that could be very good. And one of the best indicators is if they do trade Brian Robinson, this is how we know that they are comfortable with whoever they have in that backfield, and it's going to be one of the three guys that they have kicking around. Now, the current depth chart has Austin Eckler as the running back 2, and then they have Ja'Cory Krosky-Merritt as the running back 3, but he has been looking very explosive in the preseason. And then, of course, we got Chris Rodriguez, who is battling it out right now in preseason for those touches as well. Now, in my opinion, JCM is their guy. I'm just going to call him Bill because that's what he wants to be called, and he has looked the most explosive and has been the most promising to fill that role for big plays in this offense, and for fantasy football, that's what we want. Now, I will warn you though, Rodriguez will get his opportunities. I believe that they are still going to give him a little bit of that short yardage stuff, and he will eat some of these snaps even if Bill is the one to take over this offense. So he is a little bit sneaky, and I would just keep my eyes on him right now. He's probably going undrafted. And right now, it's still anyone's backfield, and if B-Rob is gone, I'm definitely going to take my shot on Bill. Now, he has an odd story with his eligibility issues that you might have heard of, but right now, he's looked explosive, and in college, he did as well, and he's still got that kind of it factor that he's been showing in preseason. He wasn't super involved in the passing game, though, so that could limit his upside, and that's something that you do want to keep an eye on, because that passing role is going to get eaten up by Eckler in the backfield if he's not able to catch the balls. Now, the last part of this Commanders offense I promise that we're going to talk about is Terry McLaurin. Right now, he is still holding out for a contract as the trade talks start to ramp up, and who knows if this is legit or if it's all just fluff. Now, the latest and greatest rumors today I saw, it was literally like 30 minutes ago, was that Terry to the Steelers for Pat Freiermuth in a second-round pick could be happening, but these are, of course, just rumors. Now, if this did happen, this would be an absolute nightmare for every single party involved, so let's just pray that this does not happen, because Terry going to the Steelers would be bad for DK, it would also be bad for Terry, and maybe it opens up some value for a guy like Debo on the Commanders, but really, we don't want to be having to start Debo and just hoping that he's good again, because that's just, I mean, nobody wants to do that. Come on, let's be real. So please, Terry, I hope that you sign with the Commanders, get this nightmare over with, and we can all just move on with our lives. But that is the current latest and greatest news that is affecting fantasy football. Make sure you hit the subscribe button for weekly fantasy football content. And yeah, go drop a like if you like this video and comment what you want to see next. I love y'all, and peace.